Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good to see you all. If you would just drop your name and where you're from in the chat, we're going to get started here in about 1 minute. Hello, Gina Moore. Good to see you. And Dr. Jones, I see you too. And Leah. Hello, Leah from Fairbanks, Alaska.
Hello, all.
Awesome. All right. Well, it is 3 o'clock Eastern time, so I'm going to get started because I know everybody has a busy day. I just want to welcome you all. My name is Elizabeth Seary. I'm the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning at Foundations, Inc. We are a national education nonprofit. You may know us from the Beyond School Hours National Education Conference, but our mission is to improve the quality of education by building the skills of educators. So we work across the school day with after-school programs, in classrooms, with districts at the state level, and we're really focused on creating a brighter future for every child every day. So if you're interested in learning more about Foundations, take a minute to follow us on social media. We'll make sure that information is in the chat for you. Again, Beyond School Hours is our signature professional learning event. We are super excited that this February, we are going to be back in Orlando, Florida. If I have to wear a hazmat suit, Dr. Gale will be there with us, I am sure. Registration is open, so please consider joining us. Again, it's February 23rd through the 26th of 2022. So please welcome with me Dr. Gale Gorke. She's Executive Director and founder of Kids Can, Inc. She is also Foundation's Director of Innovation, which is very exciting. And I have no doubt that today Gale is going to motivate and inspire us as we embark on this new school year. So Gale, welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for spending some time with us.
I'm happy to be here. Happy to be here. As you know, it's just my luck that in the middle of a pandemic, I got another job because Foundations is an awesome organization, and I am honored to be a part of it. So welcome, and I hope you all are doing okay, and that yours are happy and healthy, and you're doing what you can to stay, namaste, 6 feet away, all of the things that we have to do to support each other through this crazy time that we're having. And I don't know about you guys, but binge watching was something that happened fairly early on for me. In March, I started getting phone calls at all my work, because what I basically do is I stand in front of the room of several hundred people and have a conversation. And so that just evaporated. And so I started watching things that I didn't think I was going to get to watch. And then I, ended up watching some Disney things. And one of the things that I watched was Frozen 2. Now, let it go, that one. But this is the sequel to that. Okay. So and it was really interesting, because in my world, if there's something I'm supposed to pay attention to, if there's something I'm supposed to do, those things keep coming back at me, and I keep getting these red flags. It's like, oh, now it's being told to me again, maybe in a different way or by a different person, or there's a conversation, or I'm watching a crazy movie, and these things just strike me. And I'm a firm believer, like Kant said, that when you make a decision, the universe comes together for that to happen. And so I always am looking to see, what am I supposed to be considering now? Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to teach others and learn myself? And so I was watching Frozen 2, and there's this point in the movie where the two ladies, they don't know what to do next. And so they go to their sage, which is like this old troll guy, right? And they ask the old troll guy, we don't know what our next step is. We don't know what we should do. And he said, well, when the future is cloudy and you can't see what your direction is, the only thing you can do is take the next, or to do the next right thing. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. Because, Disney does that. They throw these little things in there, and the little nuggets. I thought, oh, that's because all of us were kind of in the dark. Last March was just insane. And something that this whole earth hadn't handled in over 100 years. And, we were faced with all these weird things, and the future looked pretty cloudy for us. And so what does it mean to do the right thing? And so I was talking to some of my friends, because again, I told you this is what happens in my world. So I'm having this conversation with a friend of mine, and she goes, well, you know what Margaret Mead said, right? And I go, Margaret Mead, you mean the anthropologist? She goes, yeah. She was asked one time, how do you know when a society has become civilized? How do you know when they're in a place where they're doing the right thing? And they asked her that, and she goes, oh, that's easy. She said, we found skeletons where the femur bone, the leg bone, had been broken, had healed, and that person had lived beyond that point. And I thought, that's kind of weird, right? And they asked her, they go, now, Margaret, how can a broken bone tell you that? And she said, well, she goes, in the wild, if you break your leg, that's it. You can't run. You can't put yourself at the shelter. You're not going to, if somebody doesn't take care of you for 6 to 8 weeks, if somebody doesn't make sure you're safe and bring stuff for you to eat and do, you're dead. You don't overcome that kind of injury without help. And they had found skeletons where somebody, someplace had taken care of this person. The skeleton had obviously broken its leg had healed, and they had lived beyond that point. And so the key was this society took care of their sick and their injured. And that was the sign of civilization. And I thought, well, okay, that's really powerful, because that means the moral obligation we have to our society is to take care of our sick and injured, and those that are poor, and those that are needy, and those that require our assistance. And so I got to thinking about public school, and most of us are connected to public school. Either you're a teacher, or you're an administrator, or you work with an organization, a CBO, Boys and Girls, YMCA, Park and Rec, where you are in connection to that. And if you read the laws, the ed code, okay, not standards, not core, not what they teach, but the responsibility of what they're supposed to teach, that's all in the ed code in your states. And virtually every state in the union, the ed code says that public education exists for 2 reasons. Now, the first one is literacy. And since you're at a foundations training, you realize the number one thing foundations is about making sure we have a literate population, that they do a lot of work in literacy and helping our little ones gain the skills to be able to read. But beyond that, literacy, if you talk about what are the most important skills a good student has, a good student knows how to read. They know how to take that information. They know what to do with that information. Our society does not work if we're not literate. If we can't read and make choices and vote based on that education that we've had. Pablo Freire says, you want to cause a revolution, teach them to read. I mean, there are still places in this world where certain individuals aren't allowed to go to school because they quite simply don't want them to have information so that they can make a different choice. And so one of the main reasons public school exists is so that we have a literate populace, because our civilization doesn't work. Our republic does not work without a literate populace. And the second thing, and this is the one that has a lot of part of why I'm talking about this today, is that we are required in public school to provide an ethical foundation. Now, there's a difference between separation of church and state. And though I will touch on religion, because many people, their moral compass comes from their faith, and I know that. But ethics and religion are not the same thing. They're moral choices, and there's rights and wrongs. But when you're talking about ethical behavior, now you'll go into a lot of the schools. In fact, I was just in one last week, trying to teach in a mask, which is hard as heck, just so you know. But they had the banners on the wall, trustworthy and character, all of these character counts things that we do, teaching kids to be honest and to be kind, and all of those things that come from ethical behavior. And so if you read the ed code says our responsibility is to teach them to read and to teach them to be ethical. And that combination of giving them knowledge and letting them make good choices that are moral choices. So how do we fit in? I think one of the most important things that I try to talk about when I talk about training and I work with individuals is how important the example is that we set. So many of the lessons we teach, we didn't even know we taught them. right? Because the kids miss nothing. They know when we have on new shoes and a new haircut. They know the ringtones on our phone. They know who's calling. They know what car we drive. They know what fast food restaurant we go to. They know what we order when we go there. And they know which other employees we don't get along with. And we never had any of these conversations because so much of what we teach by our example. And so I want you to consider, I can tell what you love because it's where you spend your time. Okay. And one of the most important things that we give is our time. 24 hours a day, once we spend it, gone forever. The choices of who we spend our time with and where we spend our time are the most important choices we make. And we can tell what you love because that's where you put your time. Okay. And the other thing we need to have is we need to have integrity. And so I like this formula for integrity. Okay. So put your right hand up. And on the palm of your right hand, I want you to put, scratch a big letter A, capital A on the palm of your right hand, okay? And say A stands for actions. Okay, now take your left hand, put a big letter B on the palm of your left hand and scratch a letter B on this part, okay? So, and say B stands for beliefs, okay? So we have actions and beliefs. And when those two meet, when our actions and our beliefs, that's what's going to be, and that's going to mean we have integrity. Okay. And so that means, how many times do we, somebody says one thing and does something else? You're like, I can't trust you. Okay. And in order to be trustworthy, we have to be someone that what we say, we do. And so much of what we do has to be based on the impetus of why do we do it in the first place? We have to be without malice. We have to be the kind of people that our actions are based on trying to do good. And that's the question we need to ask ourselves. Did you mean to do good? And this is the story behind that. There's a fable of this little boy, and he's going through the forest and he's got a bow and arrow, right? And he is notching the bow, putting the arrow in there, notching it, and he's setting things loose, and he is missing everything. This kid is the worst shot you will ever see. Okay, he is not hitting anything. Bar outside of a barn, no luck, right? And arrow after arrow, he misses and he misses. And in the midst of this beautiful white dove comes flying through the forest, and he grabs the arrow and he notches his bow and he sets it a sail. And sure enough, he strikes this dove and he kills it, and it lays at his feet. And within just a couple of minutes, out of the woods, here comes all the soldiers, and they grab the little boy by the shirt collar, and they're carrying him off to go see the queen. And the whole trip there, all he's saying is, but I didn't mean to, but I didn't mean to, but I didn't mean to. And when he's laid before the queen's throne, he says, I didn't mean to. And she has only one question for him. She asks him, but did you mean to do good? See, the problem wasn't that he killed the dove. The problem was that he aimed the bow and arrow at it in the first place. There's a proverb that says, like the madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death is he who deceives his neighbor and says, I was only kidding. I was a joke. And it wasn't. It wasn't a joke. And so we need to be people that are trustworthy. And that means integrity, actions and beliefs matching. But it also means that we don't have any malice, that the choices we make come from a place of wanting to do good. Okay. And the elements of trust then are going to be things like reliability. Okay. You have to be somebody that people can rely on. People that are leaders, they're really hard to work for when you don't know what you're going to get each time you meet with them. And I don't know if you've ever had a boss like that you were never quite sure. I always worked better for bosses that I knew what they thought. I knew the way they were going to behave, and I could kind of count on that. And I knew that they were going to be reliable, at least whether I agreed with them a lot, at least I could trust how they were going to behave. The second thing is there was an era of acceptance from them. They were somebody that even if I had messed up, even if I had difficulties, they accepted me and they wanted me to do better. And their goal was for me to make good choices. And if I made a mistake, one of the hardest things as an administrator in public school is for your staff not to tell you something went wrong. And the first time you hear about it is from some parent. And you're like, I'm going to have to check into this. And then it looks like you don't know what's going on. And so one of the things I always did with my guys and gals that worked for me was, if something happens, just tell me, let me know, give me the foreknowledge of this so that I don't walk into this blind. And And in order for that to happen, they had to feel like I was going to accept them, that I was going to, even if it's a mistake, it doesn't matter. There's still a place for you here. The other thing is you have to be open to the fact that you might have made a mistake, open to the fact that other people have other opinions than you do, open to the fact that maybe the solution isn't yours, it's somebody else's, and it's going to be better for everybody. Being open to those things and being willing to change my perspective if needed. Okay. Being open to the fact that, things change and that I have to make a different choice than what I initially thought I was going to do. So as a leader, I need to be reliable, accepting, and open. And then the last one is I have to have a love of the truth. I need to be able to cut through the crap. Do you know what I'm saying? I want to be somebody that when I hear it, I know it's the truth. People can be straightforward. They can tell me what they're thinking. They can tell me what they're feeling, so that we're not trying to play that guessing game. And so that concept of being straightforward. So what then is morality? Well, if you break it down to its simple definition, somebody who is moral is somebody that knows from right from wrong and chooses what is right. Okay. Someone who is immoral, they also know right from wrong, but they choose to do what is wrong. The third category, and this is one that I think we struggle with in our society a lot of times, is this amoral, where there's not a clear delineation between what is right and what is wrong. And we find this all the time with our kids. I mean, think about reality TV. It's not real. None of it is real. These people are all bilingual. They all speak English and cussing like it's a second language. Okay. They're materialistic. They're unkind. And if we behaved the way these real people behaved, we wouldn't keep our jobs for very long. Okay. It's entertainment. And I think so many times our kids get mixed messages. They're not sure, this is how these are successful people and they behave like this. So maybe that's how we're supposed to behave. And I think our kids are hungry for real. I think our kids are hungry for, real examples, real adult models. Our staff members are hungry for real, people that speak the truth, that do the right thing, and know the difference between those two things and are willing to talk about those differences and share those. And one of my favorite educators is a guy named Roger Taylor. Dr. Roger Taylor did a lot of work with gifted and talented kids. And I did a seminar with him years and years and years ago. And he was one of the best integrators and interdisciplinary teachers I've ever seen. And he has this thing called his 10 ahas, his analyzing human activities. And he believes if you want to study any culture, if you want to know any society, you just need to look at these 10 things. And if you look at these 10 things, it doesn't matter the country, the language, the the time and space that it belonged in, the era. If you'll know these things, I'm a firm believer. If you want to know another culture, sing their songs, dance their dances, eat their food, wear their clothes, and you'll get a pretty good feeling about what that's all about. So these were the 10 things that he said. Now, you notice number 9 has been up there. And I want you to recognize the definition, the moral, ethical. There's some kind of spiritual, some way that this society decides what is right and what is wrong, some way that it norms. Now, they're going to produce, exchange, and distribute their goods. There's some way that they account for barter or money or whatever that is. They're going to have some kind of transportation, some way to move from one place to another. Okay. And if it's quicker, then they're going to cover more distance. And if it's slower, then they're not going to be as expanded. They're going to talk to each other somehow or another. They're going to be able to communicate, whether it's in writing or smoke signals or whatever, paintings on the wall. There's going to be some kind of communication. There's something they do to protect and conserve their culture. Whether they have museums or they document things or they put things away or they keep track of things somehow or another, they want to remember what their culture is all about and keep it safe. They're going to educate, and all of us are in that little bucket right now. Okay. They're going to make and use tools and technology. Imagine what happened, when they discovered gunpowder. What happened society-wise when they discovered that one technology? What happened to us with the internet? I mean, for years we're saying, unplug our kids, unplug our kids. Now we're like, thank God there's Zoom so we can at least see each other, But this idea that they know how to make and use those tools and use them to the benefit of their society. They play. All cultures play. They have games that they play. They have things that laughter, opportunities to engage with each other in something that's fun. All cultures organize and govern themselves. And if you understand what the structure of their government looks like, that helps you to have a knowledge of them. Again, the moral, ethical, spiritual behavior that's a part of that. And number 10 is they do things for beauty. They have a definition of what is beautiful, and whether it's art or music or sculpture or whatever that is that you're going to see somehow or another, the way they dress, the way they make up, all of those kinds of things, something that the culture looks at and says, this is a beautiful thing. And today we're talking about number 9. We're talking about how does a society find its moral compass? How do you as an individual decide, okay, this is right and wrong, and I'm going to choose right. Okay. And I alluded to this. Teaching in public school, we don't teach religion. We're not supposed to. And I worked in a district with 27 represented language. So, I mean, I would have kids from a variety of faiths in my classroom. And I needed to honor that and respect it. And early on in my teaching career, now I've got both versions of this book. Check out the author's name. Okay. The guy's name is Jeffrey Moses. Come on, that makes me laugh. All right, I'm too busy laughing at that. But what Jeff did, his first book has a foreword in it from Mother Teresa. This one, I believe, has one from the Dalai Lama. But what he did is he went through all of the major religions of the world: Buddhism, Shintoism, Judaism, Christianityism, all of the isms, okay? And he looked at all of those and he said, where are places where they teach the same thing? And in his book, he has what would be considered universal truths. Example, treat others the way you want to be treated. And then he quotes that from all of the different places that it's listed. Confucius said it 500 years before Jesus did. Okay. And he shows you in the Torah, in the Quran, in the Bible, in the writings of Buddha, in Shinto, in Hinduism, all of those things. He shows you in their writings what they say. And many of them say almost exactly the same thing. And so if we can find this place, this universal truth, this thing that when I say it to you, your faith goes to your writings and you say, yeah, I know that. That's where I got that. And this is the way that we coexist. This is the way that we find those things that all societies say are good, true, right, honorable. And I don't want to impose on somebody's faith and it's not about them believing what I believe. It's about them believing what they believe, me believing what I believe, and us believing the same thing. And not realizing maybe it came from two different places, but we're going to end up in the same spot. And that's probably the most powerful lesson I learned early on in education, is I could meet people on a place where I could do that. And this book was exceedingly helpful because it gave me some direction when it came to that. Okay. The other thing is all of us have a way that we've developed our moral compass. We all have moral development in our lives. And I'm going to give you kind of a quick overview. I'm going to touch on one of my favorite guys about moral development with you and let you do a couple of quick activities in that. But I want you to recognize that this is something that's been studied for years and years and years and years. Now, some of the theorists, virtually all of them, one of them they thought that things happened in stages where it just didn't happen all at once. It was something that happened over a period of time. Guys like Erikson had 8 stages. Piaget had 4 stages. Gilligan, who took Colbert's 6 stages, but added gender to it. Okay. These guys all are like that. And then you got the ones that are more behavior oriented, like Skinner and Pavlov, ring the bell and salivate, all that kind of thing. But all believed our experiences, especially those that happen when we're young, often shaped us for the rest of our lives. Okay. And so this idea that this is something that can be developed in us, this is something that we can work at and get better at, okay? And that's one of the things I want you to see. Most of you have heard of Maslow. If you look at his new work, he's got 6 stages instead of 5. I think it's so they can sell more books. I'm not sure, but they took number 5 and kind of split it into 2 things. But most of us have learned it this way. There's the basic needs: food, shelter, clothing, right? Then we want to feel safe, and we will do things that are not safe in order to meet our basic needs. Okay. Once the needs are met, then we feel safe. Then we have to feel like somebody loves us and we belong. And if you've heard me talk about stress, the number one key to handling stress is attachment, having somebody who loves us, because our self-worth rests on the fact that somebody loved us. That's why I don't believe parents can love their kids too much. I think early on, teachers loving their students. Guys, we're being paid to love kids, and we need to love them so that they can learn to love themselves. And in that process, figure out what they're good at and give that to the world. Okay. That's what it means to be self-actualized. Is I figured out what I'm good at, and now I'm going to go give it to the world because people love me and I love myself, and off I go. And I don't know a single kid who gets in a gang because he wants to get in trouble. I know a lot of kids that got in gangs because of Maslow. It met their basic needs. They could earn money, take care of their families. They felt safe because they're part of a group. So they feel like they belong. You know, I belong to this group or that group, and I wear the colors and I have the whole thing. I get my value from that. And then the group says, hey, you know what you're really good at? And then they let me do for the group. And then they're grateful for the efforts that I make on their behalf. And so this is a basic understanding of Maslow, right? And the idea that those things are going to layer on top of that. That's why kicking a kid out, number 3, if you take a kid out of a class and you kick him out, you trash his self-worth. That's why kicking out is never a great idea. Okay. It keeping them in, figuring out maybe take a step aside, a little timeout kind of thing is one thing. Telling a kid, hey, listen, take a seat here. I want you to work through this a little bit. And then when you're ready, you can come back in, is different than saying, get out of my sight. I don't want to see you today. There's a big difference between those 2 ways. So this is kind of that basic thing. The other guy that's probably the most common that you hear about when we talk about moral development is a guy named Lawrence Kohlberg. And if you look at Kohlberg's theory, he basically says there's 3 levels. There's a pre-conventional, which I'm worried about me. There's a conventional where I'm worried about us, which is a small group of people I care about. And then there's the post-conventional, which is that, them, those out there, society. And that we move through 2 stages in each of these levels. Now, the first stage, you see the little sledgehammer? The way we decide what is right and wrong is if it feels good, it's right. If it hurts me, it's wrong. That's the beginning of right and wrong, how it makes me feel. And we all know people that never got out of this stage. They make a decision their whole life based on how stuff makes them feel. Okay. The second one is a pong. You see the little reciprocal ping, 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 ping. When a kid says to you, what are you going to give me? What deal can I make with you? He just moved up a stage of morality because now he's willing to do a little something maybe he doesn't like because there's still something in it for him. So he's going to make a deal. Okay. Then we go to stage 3, and stage 3 has to do with this group of individuals that I've begun to care what they think about me. If a kid says, I can't do that because my mom will get mad. My friends are counting on me. I got to do this thing because my boss is, whatever that is. When I begin to shape my behavior because I care what important others to me, think about what that behavior looks like. Now I've begun to look at this us. Okay. Then there's law and order. And this is where I've been to parts of this country where there's like a stop sign in the middle of nowhere. And you can see for miles, there's nobody coming, and you still stop. Okay. Because the rules say we're supposed to stop. Now, 85% of the population doesn't get past this point. All right. If you want to get into stage 5 and stage 6, well, stage 5, you see the cupcake. So pre-COVID classroom, 20 kindergartners, there's a birthday. So mom baked cupcakes and she put them in the Tupperware and they got the little sprinkles and then they're really cute. And she brings 20 cupcakes to school that day and there's 21 kids in class. And it's a kid in the class who says, that's all right. The new kid can have mine. Now that's a whole nother level of morality, to give up what I might even want, maybe even need, so that there's someone who has a greater need than I have. And I'm going to give that up because I'm more concerned about them than I am about myself. And not just people that I know well, but total strangers. Okay. That's that next level. That's that social contract. And then the last one, and the reason many people don't get here is because it costs them everything. So I'll give you names, okay? Gandhi, Mandela, Tutu, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa. These are all people that said if the world would just do this one thing, have this principled conscience and behave like this, and it costs them everything. And that's why not so many people make it to this stage. Okay. Now, the beauty of doing what we do for a living and me being around the wonderful people that are a part of educational systems is a lot of you guys know this and you're willing to give of yourselves. In fact, that's why one of the other most popular seminars I do is on self-care, because y'all just give until you're empty. because you know how important it is to make society a better place for everyone. That's who you are. So thank you for that. And just make sure you take care of yourself in that process. So let's talk a little bit about one of my favorite guys that talks about moral development. I like Alfred Adler. Now, if you don't know who Adler is, I'm going to do two things with you right now. They give you a little bit of a feel for who Adler is. Okay. We're going to do the Adler activity called the earliest childhood recollection. So this is going to be an opportunity for you to see where some of your earliest ideas came from that have stayed with you in your development of your moral choices. Okay. Your decisions about what is right and what is wrong. Okay. So I'm going to give you some sentences, and on a piece of paper, I want you to write the answer to these sentences. Okay. So take out a piece of paper, a pen, crayon, blood, something to write with. Okay. And I want you to finish these statements. Okay. Just whatever comes to your mind, just finish them off. Okay. So here's the first one. First statement. The nature of man is. So what is the nature of man to you? The nature of man good, and or do they need to have a little help from the very beginning? Or what is the nature of man? When you think about mankind, what do you think of? How would you describe them? Okay, mankind at large. Okay. Okay, now here's the second one. Truth is. Now, when you hear truth, what does that mean to you? What is truth? How do you know it when you see it? What are the characteristics of it? Truth is what? All right, let's do number 3. When you hear the word mother or motherhood, what does it mean to be a mom? Number 4. We're an equal opportunity organization, so we got to give a little equity here. Talked about moms. Now, what's dad mean to you? When you think of a father or fatherhood, what does that mean to you? What is that in your life? What role does that play? What do you, when you hear the word father? So we kind of looked at the big scale, nature and truth. Now we looked at, the generation ahead of us, our parents. And now I want you to look at yourself a little bit, these next two. When I say, who are you? What do you identify with? What are the words that you use to describe yourself? What groups do you see yourself as being a part of? What do you align with? How do you identify yourself? I identify with this. Might be a thought, might be a group, might be the idea, it could be, I don't know, whatever. When I say the words, I identify with this, what is that? How do you see yourself? And then the last one, how do you know when you get it right? I feel successful when ... How do you know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're heading in the right direction? What tells you that? When do you get to go, good job, pat yourself on the back? Okay. All right. So these are the questions. Now, make sure that you have them written down. You can fill them in a little bit as we go along. But now you have to do the second part of this. Okay. The second part of this is you're going to need to go back to the earliest recollection that you have, the earliest memory you can think of. And for some of this is quite a journey. Okay. You know, some people that are 20, it's not so many years. Somebody like me, 63, I got to go back a ways. Okay. Now I'm going to give you my earliest recollection. Okay. I'm going to give you my earliest memory. My earliest memory is I got a hold of my dad's hand. I'm about 2.5, 3 years old, and I'm coming out of a military hospital. Okay. Wearing my first pair of glasses. And I am stepping on the black and white squares because of these military officers always had these 12-inch black and white checkered floors, right? And I remember I got a hold of my dad's hand and I'm stepping on these black squares. And my dad is looking down. My dad's 6'2", okay? And I'm 2.5 years old. So this is a big man, got a hold of my hand and he's walking me out and I'm stepping on these squares. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Daddy, they're black and white." And my father didn't realize that on the way in, my eyes were so bad, the floor was gray. I couldn't differentiate black and white checkers. It was because I got my first pair of glasses that now I could see clearly. And there's video movies of me and, Halloween, and I got my costume on. I'm looking at my candy like this. My parents used to have to keep pulling me back away from the television because I was always so close to it because I couldn't see. So I got my first set of glasses at 2.5, 3 years. I got contacts at 4.5, 5 years old. I was just before we left for Germany. I was like the youngest kid in the United States to get contact lenses. And I always wore gas permeable hard contacts because I couldn't wear the soft ones. And then later they made gas permeable ones, which were hard and a little more breathable, but I could never wear soft contacts because my prescription was so bad. Okay. I got LASIK in my 40s. I was the second worst one to get LASIK from my doctor, second worst prescription. My prescription, now normal's 20/20, right? My prescription was 2,950. Okay. The E on the top, I couldn't tell which direction the E was facing on the top of the chart, let alone read line number 3. Okay. So if you've seen the eye chart, you know what I'm talking about. So the very first recollection I have, the first memory I have was the first time I saw clearly. Now, when I went back and looked at what I wrote about truth and mankind and my parents and all of those things, almost every one of them talked about being able to see and not trust what I see and make sure that I could see this clear. And it was all about vision. So now, when you think about your earliest childhood recollection, I want you to go back and look at your list. And I want you to consider these things. Who was with you in your memory? Who were you there with? Okay. How were you feeling? What was going on inside of you? Were you active or were you passive? Was it something you were doing or was it something you were sitting back and watching? And the last part is, do you see connections between what that earliest memory is and how you see the world today and how you look at those areas that help us to determine what is right and wrong? And so this is Adler's way of doing that. Okay. And this is a really cool thing to do with your kids. It's a really good thing to do with your staff members because it kind of gets people to go back and think about, now, how did I come up with that idea? Where did that come from? Is this just something that I've just believed because it was on the internet? Or is this something that, I really researched and I really had some conversations about, and there's a reason behind why I feel this way and think about this way. Okay. If you're not sure who Adler is yet, this will probably, if you talk about anything with birth order, firstborn, middleborn, baby of the family, only child, if you talk about that, you're talking Adler because that's his thing. Birth order is one of the most important things that Adler has given us in looking at how we behave and the difference between nature and nurture. Because, people always say, is it nature, is it nurture? And the answer is yes. It is both nature and nurture. And so consider where you are in your family. And then, so we're going to look at this. And I want you to consider these questions because this is part of what Adler talks about as well. So I'm a baby. So if anybody else is a baby in the family, okay, I'm the last born, I'm the youngest. Yes, you and me, G, you and me. Okay. Yeah, there are certain things that I know that I'm very much the baby of the family, right? And I know middle kids, I know firstborns, and I know all of that. So how would you be different if you think you were in a different position? Do you think your life would have changed in the way that you see the world based on if you were firstborn or secondborn? Now, if you know my family history, my mom was born in Berlin in 1928, went through World War II in Berlin. She was married to a German police officer that would hear civil cases. And when he discovered that they were already having plans for the Berlin Wall and all of that in 1951, he started to smuggle information out with my mom's help to the Americans about what the Germans were doing. So her first husband was arrested, was sentenced to death, ended up spending 12 years in prison and was bartered out through a system of about 250 prisoners that were bought with wood and steam. This is a convoluted story. I know you're looking at me, what are you talking about? But here's the dilemma. My mom had a son from that first marriage. Okay. And he was literally taken from her. His face was stamped on her passport. He couldn't leave the country and she had to leave her son. Now we found him 47 years later. So I have a half brother in Germany that we've connected with. Now this sounds like a movie. I know. And it's crazy because when I asked my mom, well, who did you work for? And she said, they said they was the CIC, which was the beginning of the CIA. So my mom was basically smuggling stuff in her bodice, you know, in parties from East to West Berlin. Whole story changed when we found my brother, Wolfgang, who is the firstborn. And my brother, Glenn, who was my brother growing up, all of a sudden became the middle kid. And and he had some real issues with that. He was afraid that, you know, his role was being taken and all of that. And so this idea of if you were born in a different position, if things changed on that, all right. The other thing is I don't know about you, but my brother had one set of rules and I had another set of rules. And it was like, how's that fair? You know? But gender made a difference in my family and how I was treated and how he was treated, what he was allowed to do and what I was allowed to do. And do you think that would have changed if that was part of your family? And then the last one is thinking about your position today, who you are today in the world and what you do. Do you see that some of those things come into play, you know, some of those characteristics of being in that position in the family? So those are my two favorite Adler activities. And I sent you a handout as a part of that, so you guys can follow up on that. But this is a really fun place to talk about how do we decide what is right and wrong, and how do we decide how we can behave, you know, what we can get away with. You know, and I don't know how many babies like us were like, a lot of times our parents were so tired of parenting our older siblings that by the time they got to us, it was easy, you know, and then our other brothers, sisters are like, how come they get to do that? You never let me do that when I, you know, and we get that whole thing. So some of those kinds of things, I want you to consider that and think about how does that form that moral compass that we're talking about, this concept of doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. How do we determine that? How do we decide that? I do want to share one other books. This is a book that I read in my late 20s, and it changed my life forever. It starts out with the words, "This is a dangerous book." And it's because he doesn't want people looking at others. He wants them looking at themselves. Now, if you don't know who M. Scott Peck is, in the 70s, he wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled, which is probably one of the most read translated journeys. If you want a really good book to get to talk about life's journeys, he talks about, you know, the 4 skills that make life easier for us to make good decisions. And one of them is delaying gratification, the idea that we can put some things off, we can do some things ahead of time so that we can enjoy the rewards that come from that. The Road Less Traveled is a phenomenal book. Don't get me wrong. But the book that he wrote that I think was the most powerful in my life was this one called People of the Lie, The Hope for Healing Human Evil. And I think one of the things that we all struggle with is sometimes we look at humanity and we say, wow, how could somebody march people into a gas chamber? How could somebody take women and children and My Lai in Vietnam and kill them? How could something like the Abu Ghraib prison happen, where these are just regular soldiers that all of a sudden became so sadistic and so unkind? And one of the things that he does in his book is he delineates between psychosis, individuals where there's something broken, you know, the Ted Bundys, the guys that have some short wiring issues that, you know, and those that are just regular people that are capable of doing really, really bad things to others, very evil things to others. And his goal is to look at them and learn from them and be able to not do those kind of things ourselves. And so in his premise is this: people that are capable of doing really bad things to others practice two habits. The first is they lie. They lie so often they've come to believe it to be the truth. And they sell it and they sell it and they sell it and they say it and they say it so much that the lie becomes true to them. And yet it's still a lie. Hence the name of the book, People of the Lie. Okay. The second thing they do is they scapegoat, which means they don't take responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault, somebody else's reason, and they're always going to be able to push it off in all these different places. And the book talks about, the different strategies that are employed. And, he talks about some guy that has a drinking problem and he's living on the island of Guam. And he's like, well, you have a problem with alcohol. And he goes, yeah, because there's nothing to do here but drink. And he goes, well, what else do you like to do? And he goes, well, I like to fish. He goes, well, how about the next time, instead of going out and getting drunk, you go fishing? Well, there's the same fishing holes. And then he makes all these excuses, so he doesn't go fishing. He goes, well, what else do you like to do? Well, I like to go to the movies. Okay, well, great. Why don't you go to the movies next time? Well, there's only one theater and we've already seen the movie. And it's like all these excuses, all this rationalization, all these things. And so finally he says to the guy, so the truth is there's other things you could do, but you choose to get drunk. Oh, no, there's nothing else to do here. And it's the idea that they won't accept the truth and they won't take responsibility for their actions. And this is the beginning of where I became really serious about speaking the truth and hearing the truth. And in my classroom, I threw all the other rules out. I had two rules. We're going to tell the truth and we're going to take responsibility. If you want to be in a relationship with me, if you want to be my friend, I have two rules. We're going to tell the truth and we're going to take responsibility. And if we can do those two things, then I can be trusted and you can be trusted and we can have. And remember, the last thing of trust was that straightforwardness, that the love of the truth, to speak it, to hear it when we don't want to. I mean, to put people in your life that are willing to tell you the truth, even when they know we're not going to like it, that is such a powerful relationship because it helps us to grow. And you need to be aware that you're not just responsible for your actions, but you are responsible for your influence. It's not just what I do. That's what I teach others to do. So the last part of this, and this is going to blow you away. Okay. One of the things that I looked into were like the 28 experiments that they no longer can do because they cause psychological harm to people. Okay. But there were some experiments done in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that looked at humanity and how humanity would respond when presented with certain information, whether they would conform, whether they would be unkind, what would they do? So the first one is the Ash conformity. And you might have read about this. If you took any psychology class, they always talk about Ash. And by the way, all of these experiments were done on men. I think you might get something different if there were some women included. I don't know. Call me crazy. I'm not sure we think about things exactly the same way. And I don't know that we respond the same way. I mean, that was one of the problems with heart issues. Females that have heart attacks, it looks very different than males who have heart attacks. And the medication and the kinds of things have to be done differently because physiologically, there's a difference. Okay. This was done by Solomon Ash in a college in 1951. Okay. And what he did is he grabbed 7 guys and he said, okay, dude, here are these lines. Okay. And I want you answer the question correctly the first 2 times. And then the third one, answer obviously the wrong answer. All 7 of you guys need to answer the wrong answer. And the 8th guy was the guy they were doing the experiment on. And they basically wanted to see if they could get this last guy to answer the obviously wrong answer simply because everybody else did. Okay. 37 of the 50, 74% of the people that were part of this experiment said, yeah, that's the right answer, even though it was obviously the wrong one. Only 26% said, I'm sorry. I don't care if all 7, these guys are all wrong. Only 26% stood up to that. 74% conformed. And then came this guy, Milgram. This one blew me away. Now, if you don't know Milgram and his shock experiment, what they did is they took, again, 40 males between the ages of 20 and 50 years. They put the experiment, the person they were experimenting on on the other side of a glass window. And on that other side of the glass was a person that was going to answer questions. When they answered incorrectly, my job was to flip a switch and shock that other person. Now, mind you, no shocking happened. They were on the other side of the glass. When I flipped the switch, the little light would light up and the actor on the other side would act like he was being shocked. Okay. So there was no shock that was given. Now I'm sitting in this room with this panel that I'm flipping switches on. Okay. And to my back is the experimenter who's encouraging me to shock this other individual when they screw up. Here's the thing that blew me away, but every one of them shocked that person on the other side of the screen at least once. 66% continued to shock that person at levels that would have been lethal. Only 12% walked away early, like after one shock. 12% said, I can't do this. And they walked out. 66% were persuaded to continue to shock that individual. Now let's go to Stanford and talk about a guy named Zimbardo. And what he did is he took the bottom floor of his building and turned it into a prison. They literally went and pretended like they arrested part of the students were assigned as prisoners, some were guards. And he did all of this. I've told him, you physically can't harm this individual, but you can do psychological things to control them, and you need to control them. And his girlfriend finally said to him 2 or 3 days into this experiment, Phil, knock this off. Because within just a few days, the guards became sadistic and the prisoners became depressed. And he had to stop the experiment because absolute power corrupted them absolutely. So let's look at the ones that chose the right thing. In the Ash Conformity, there were 26% that said, I'm sorry, you can't convince me that's the right answer when I know it's not. And the Milgram shock, there was only 12 that walked away from the experiment after one. But this was what they said to them. They said, please continue. Then they said the experiment requires that you continue. Then it said it's absolutely essential. And number 4 was the clincher. You don't have a choice. And what we need to know is we always have a choice. We always have the choice to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And can you be in a room where nobody sees and nobody knows and you do the right thing, even if you're not going to get credit for it? You do it simply because it's the right thing to do. So how do we teach this to our kids? This is when those dilemmas and paradoxes and scenarios come in. Kids need to practice this kind of thinking early on, because that's going to help them when the real situations show up. Classic. If you guys have ever heard about Heinz is the guy whose wife is sick. He lives in the city where the doctor has the cure. Doctor won't give him payments. And so he basically steals it to save his wife's life. Okay. And the question is, who's right and wrong in this scenario? And those kinds of things, we put kids in those kind of scenarios and we walk them through those kind of things. So I gave you 28 scenarios and you need to look through them and use ones that work for your community and work for your age group and all of that. But the idea that we practice this kind of thinking ahead of time so that when we're faced with a situation that puts us in a place where we need to choose the right thing, and it's a hard choice to make, that we have the skills and the abilities to do that. The other place I would go is to Michelle Borba. If you don't know who she is outstanding. She's an international speaker on teaching kids to be empathetic. And she believes some of the violence and the bullying that's a part of our world today is because our kids don't practice empathy. She has 9 steps. And in her book, this is a book written for parents. But by the way, what we do is one step away, right? In loco parentis. Okay. We're parenting these kids anyway. Each of the chapters has one of these 9 steps, and then there's activities to teach them that. And by the way, of the 9 steps, 3 have to do with morality. We have to have a moral identity to know what we identify with, what is right and what is wrong. We have to have moral imagination, the ability to look at something and say, what if we did this? How could this be better? Could this, what would the world look like if we would just do some of these things? And then we have to have moral courage. We have to be willing to stand up to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So the last place I want to go, we are going to make mistakes, and it's really interesting. When our good guys screw up, we are really hard on them. They can be good like forever, and they make one mistake and we're like, pounce on them, right? But when our bad guys do something right, we're like, oh, look, turned over a new leaf. and the problem is everybody makes mistakes. Everybody tries to do the right thing. And one of the things we do is we make a mistake and we end up doing something that doesn't, do good. And sometimes it harms. And so I want you to think what Anthony Roberts said about he might know Tony. Tony's kind of like a world famous, guy. He says, when you fail, you ponder, and when you succeed, you party. And that's why greatness only comes from when we screw up. Okay. And we need to not be afraid of fear or failure. We don't need to be afraid of that. What we do need to do is we need to change it from that we can't do it into something we must. And there's two basic thoughts. One, failure is a teacher. Okay. It just basically tells you, don't do that again. Okay. Or you can think that there really is no such thing as failure. There's only outcomes. And if the outcomes suck, we want better outcomes. We need to tell ourselves a different story. We need to do something different. One of my favorite quotes is Michael Jordan. And he said, I missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I was trusted to take the game-winning shot and I missed. I failed over and over and over again, but that is why I succeed, because every time they threw Michael the ball, he took the shot. Even if he knew he might not make it, he still took the shot and he got better and better and better at taking the shot. So when you screw up, and you will, my challenge to you is please don't feel guilty. Guilt is, I don't know, it's crippling. Guilt is the thing that makes us want to run and hide. And when we feel like we've messed up and we feel guilty, we make excuses, we withdraw, we do all of the things that aren't going to make it better. When you mess up, the goal is to feel sorrow, genuine sorrow, to feel like you made a mistake, own that mistake, accept that mistake, be willing to correct that mistake, and be able to offer forgiveness. Now, by the way, us forgiving others is more for us, just so you know. It's nice to forgive them, and then, but it will keep you from being better or bitter. And it'll also help you deal with the hurt that comes from that. And it's really an act on your own behalf. Obviously, if somebody forgives you, you get that feeling. But if we can forgive others. So I'm going to end where I started, because I started with Frozen, right? So forgiveness is let it go, let it go. Margaret Mead said this, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And my last binge watching was Harry Potter. And in the Chamber of Secrets, Harry comes to this realization that he is connected to Voldemort and has many of the same abilities that Voldemort has. And he worries that he himself could become evil. And he talks to Dumbledore and he says, look, I'm really worried about this. And this is what Dumbledore says. It's not our abilities that show what we truly are. So I'm going to stay in touch with me. Here's my contact information. Other than that, thanks for hanging out. Elizabeth, it's all you.
Gale, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Awesome. Amazing as ever. We appreciate you spending time with us. And again, I knew we would all end up inspired and motivated to really take charge this school year. And it's an important message to take with us. So I appreciate it. I want to thank everybody who joined us today. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule. Please take a minute to fill out the survey. That information is in the chat for you. We are having these follow-up webinars every Wednesday. So again, there's more information on how you can register for next week's webinar. And keep an eye out beyond school hours. The registration is open. We will be in Orlando February 23rd through the 26th, and you can register now. Again, thank you for joining us. If you're interested in following us on social media, we'll make sure that information is in the chat as well. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you again soon.